A very, very, very long time ago, there was a little boy who was completely fascinated with things that flew. And for many years, he knew this was what he wanted to do. He wanted to learn to fly. Or to just fly. But this was not to be because fate had a different plan. After getting some speakers for his ears, his father had grown tired of taking pictures, so he gave his son his camera, and from then on, the little boy knew that this was what he was going to do. But his dreams of flying, either with a plane or without one, never truly went away. Then, 7 years ago, those two passions came together. Some ingenious boffins in faraway lands had made a flying camera, so the little boy took it to the skies. He was amazed at just how rubbish the video was. But things got better very quickly. In that first year, over 1,000 new flying cameras came out, and he took his favourites with him all around the world. And he filmed things that even today are some of his favourite shots ever. From huge triangles that people climbed up, to giant ice rinks in the North Pole, to even more exotic places that were beyond his wildest dreams. He just wished that one day the video from them would look as wonderful as his rather boring but tremendous tripod cameras. He also wished that those boffins from faraway lands would make them smaller, as he had this peculiar and insatiable desire to fly backwards through anything that was there. Over the next few years, the postman kept bringing him new flying cameras, and he made little reviews where he pretended to know what he was talking about, so people all over the world with nothing better to do could watch them on their phones and see if the video was indeed marvellous. Sadly, as the flying cameras got smaller, the video quality dropped, just like when they grew tired of being in the air. But thankfully, a miracle happened. They did indeed get much better and still stayed small. This gave him hope that perhaps one day soon he could open up his window and let all his old ones fly free into the wild. Because all he wanted was just one single flying camera that was small and looked as good as his rather boring but tremendous tripod cameras. And that brings us to just a few days ago, when the postman, for the 19th time this month, gave him the latest flying camera from those ingenious boffins in faraway lands. So, once more, he set out to make yet another video where he pretended to know what he was talking about, as he was the only person making these on the internet. He knew this was why he truly came into this world. And maybe, just maybe, this was the one he'd been waiting for.
So this is the DJI Air 2S, and I do think it is the best drone that they make. Whether it is the best flying camera is a much more complicated question and will be the focus of this review, because there is a lot to talk about. There's a lot of good, and unfortunately there is a bit of bad as well. Hopefully by the end of this review you will know whether this is the flying camera for not just me, but for you. So what do I mean by the best drone that they make? In many ways, I really think it could well be. But it is subjective, as your needs could well, and probably are, different to mine. It does have the most up-to-date technology of all their drones. I'm not talking about the camera, I am just talking about the actual features of the aircraft itself. Some things are better on their other drones, of course. The Mavic 2 can go a little bit faster and has stronger motors to cope with stronger winds. Their flagship drone, the Inspire 2, is much faster than both of these and has very powerful motors, so it can cope with much more extreme conditions. But on the flip side, it doesn't have as many obstacle avoidance sensors as the Air 2S, let alone the Mavic 2. And the video transmission is inferior with a much reduced range and quality. The Air 2S is DJI's first drone to have OcuSync 3, and this gives it a video transmission range of almost double that of the Inspire 2. These distances are all a bit irrelevant in the real world, as you are supposed to keep your drone in line of sight, and I doubt there's many people who can spot a little grey drone 12 kilometers away. But what this does translate to is it's highly unlikely to lose your signal when flying, and you really should always get a perfect 1080p feed to your controller. The Air 2S now has upward sensors, but there are still no side sensors like the Mavic 2 has. I believe that's currently the only DJI drone with sensors in all directions, and it is an important feature. I do a lot of side tracking shots with my drones, and I may or may not have gotten my Mavic Air stuck in a tree once because of this. The Air 2S is also the first of DJI's drones to have AirSense installed for every region. This lets you know if there are any planes or helicopters flying near you. One last drone comparison thing. The flight time is 3 minutes less than the Air 2's quoted 34 minutes. It is 24 grams heavier at 395 grams. But this flight time is the same as the Mavic 2. So taking all these factors into account, this is why I think it's probably their best drone. I know many will disagree. Well, it's the internet, but I did say it's subjective. The omnidirectional sensors and stronger motors are still big selling points of the Mavic 2 line. Now that the flying part is out of the way, I can talk about the camera part, as this is the biggest upgrade that the Air 2S has over the Mavic Air 2. By the way, this isn't replacing, it's just a somewhat souped up version, and no, that's not what the S stands for. Those marketing boffins in faraway lands have come up with
surprising, superior, safe, smart, and satisfying.
Coincidentally, those are some of the words I use in my very right, swipeable, incredibly accurate, genuine, and honest Tinder profile. What it should have stood for, maybe, is sensor, as the camera has a 1-inch sensor, just like the Mavic 2 Pro. The cameras do look very similar, the Air 2S just doesn't have that Hasselblad logo. And that's just a colour fidelity thing anyway, it's nothing physical about the actual camera. And it's odd that they decided not to add that colour into this model. Having a 1-inch sensor is obviously a big improvement over the 1/2-inch one of the Mavic Air 2. Although that one does have some fancy trickery that enables it to use its 12 megapixels to create 48 megapixel photos, as well as capture true HDR video. But I would rather have a sensor 4 times the surface area over both of those, as it means less noisy video, better low light performance, and even the ability to get a little bit of bokeh. Sadly, it doesn't have the variable aperture of the Mavic 2 Pro's camera. It's fixed at f2.8. Being able to adjust your exposure in flight without having to change your shutter speed or ISO is the biggest advantage of the Mavic 2 Pro camera over this one. One of the best things about the Air 2S's camera over all the other Mavics is the field of view of the lens. Yes, I know it's not called a Mavic anymore as they're dropping those names to focus on the DJI brand more, but it's easier just to bunch them up together like this.
I spent way too long doing numerous tests to not just compare the field of views of the different drones' cameras, but also the quality of the images and how they are captured.
In 35mm equivalent terms, the Air 2S has a 22.4mm lens. They do say 22mm, but Lightroom tells me it's 22.4. In comparison, the Mavic Air 2 has a 24mm equivalent, and the Mavic 2 Pro has a 28mm one. I do prefer to have a wide lens on my drone, and 22mm is very nice. Having a wider lens is especially useful when you're doing those lovely top-down shots, because if you can't get everything in frame when you're at the legal maximum height of 120 meters, then tough luck.
As the Air 2S and the Mavic 2 Pro are the drones with the closest cameras, I'm going to focus on just how enormously different they are in the way that they capture their video.
The Air 2S and Mavic 2 Pro both have the same resolution 5.4K 1-inch sensors. Whilst the photos are very similar, the video from them is very different. The Mavic 2 Pro cannot record 5.4K, the maximum is 4K. And to get to that resolution with the full field of view, it throws away a lot of information to get there, resulting in an image which is quite soft. The HQ mode samples the sensor 1:1, so the quality is much better. But it is cropping the sensor, so your 28mm equivalent field of view narrows to around 40mm. Also, in 4K you can only record up to 30p. When you record D-Log or HLG on this drone, both of which are the only ways to get 10-bit recording, there's no optics correction, so that will make your shot a bit tighter still when you apply that in post. The Air 2S also needs to be in these modes to record in 10 bits, but there is optics correction applied in camera. The Air 2S records in 5.4K up to 30p and samples the sensor 1:1, resulting in a very nice image. In 4K up to 30p, there's a tiny crop of about 1.4%, but there is no line skipping. DJI tell me that all the lower resolutions up to 30p process the full 5.4K video signal, and then it's downscaled to the respective resolutions just as it writes it to the card. Well, that's what they said. And it does look really good. Night and day better than the Mavic 2 Pro full field of view 4K. In 4K, 48p, 50p, 60p, it has to sample the sensor 1:1, resulting in a crop which makes the lens an equivalent of 35mm instead of 22mm. The video here looks as good as a normal speed 4K, which is a testament to how good their full field of view recording method is. Because the 5.4K method only goes to 30p, it cannot use this method for high frame rates, hence the 1:1 sampling. The only mode in the Air 2S that does line skip is the 1080p 100 frames per second and 120 frames per second slow motion setting. And it looks awful. Don't use it. If you do want to have a tighter field of view, you can use the zoom mode, which is only available in the standard picture profile. In 4K you get a 2 and 4 times zoom. Now these are upscaled digital zooms which are cleaned up. The 2 times actually looks half decent, and it's better than simply enlarging your video to 200% in post, as there is more detail and less noise. But the 4K zoom looks awful. It's a shame that this is only in standard mode, because that's by far the worst profile to shoot in. Not just because of the dynamic range, because the image has that typical DJI over sharpening. But very surprisingly, the other 2 modes don't seem to have this. I would love to be able to tweak my sharpness, contrast and saturation like the Mavic Pro line lets you, but you can't. We have these 3 picture profiles and what they're set to by default. The Air 2S has really surprised me with its image. I wasn't expecting much, as the video quality has been a constant downside with their new drones. The hideous amount of over-sharpening,
and their stubborn refusal to let users adjust it in the app despite constant begging from myself and others, it's just felt like a lost cause. But the video in the Air 2S looks more natural and less video-y. Is that a word? Plus the addition of D-Log and 10-bit recording helps to give it a better dynamic range. I still think the Mavic 2 Pro HQ mode looks better, but with a 40mm equivalent field of view, it's frequently just not wide enough. Plus, of course, when you are cropping in that much on a 1-inch sensor, you're not actually using a 1-inch sensor anymore, just a small portion of it. You've seen a number of my shots so far that are really slow and controlled. They were not easy to do because the Cine Smooth mode is not the same as tripod mode. DJI are saying it's just a renaming of it, which is fine, as tripod mode never really made much sense because tripods don't generally move. But there is a 5 times speed increase with this Cine Smooth mode over the old tripod mode that we've had in so many of their drones over the past 5 years. When they first introduced it, and I hate using these words, but they are truly appropriate here, it was game-changing for me. After all, I do have this obsession with flying backwards through things. And with it, I'm also able to replicate classic camera movements like dolly shots and crane shots with ease. That speed increase from 1 meter a second to 5 meters a second means the only way you can really do these sort of shots is by being incredibly gentle on the sticks. In tripod mode, I was already gentle, but now the sticks are more sensitive due to that increased speed. This was actually introduced with the Mavic Air 2, although initially it was still called tripod mode in it. But now it's also called Cine Smooth mode. I only noticed this after I finished my review, as I didn't do the usual type of shots whilst filming it. DJI need to urgently address this, as I know I'm not the only one who is up in arms about it. They just need to add a setting in the control menu to change the maximum speed in this mode. I do like 5 meters a second, as it can be useful at times when the old tripod mode is too slow. Whilst most of my shots are low and slow, there are times where I need to be high and fast. If you go to the Storyblocks website, the sponsor of this video, type in drone and go through some of the hundreds of clips that come up, and you'll see epic high shots, but you'll also see just as many low and slow controlled shots. I've been using them for the past 8 months, and in that time I've used dozens of clips in my reviews which have helped me realise some of my more different ideas. If you cast your mind back to the opening sequence of this video, 5 out of 7 of these super 8mm shots were from Storyblocks. Rather than starting the video with a boring unboxing, I had the idea to do something about my history with drones. I have a couple of hours of super 8mm clips from my childhood and found some that fitted, but not enough to tell the story. So I searched for newborn boy, boy plane, boy camera, and I downloaded about 40 shots, selected the ones that worked the best, and then heavily treated them to match my existing super 8mm footage. Without these shots, I couldn't have created this opening to this video. That's the fantastic thing about Storyblocks. I have unlimited downloads from over 1 million royalty-free video clips, photos, music, sound effects and more. And there's different plans to suit you. To learn more about Storyblocks, click the link in the description below, or just head here. You've already seen a couple of stills from the camera, but I haven't actually focused on them. They're actually really lovely to come off it, as good as the Mavic 2 Pro, but wider. And they're certainly better than the Mavic Air 2 standard photo mode. Are they better than its fancy 48 megapixel mode? I think they look nicer. They don't have as much detail, but they have less noise, and I'll choose this over that anytime. The subject tracking is superb, and their best yet thanks to their APAS system. which makes it their best drone yet at detecting obstacles, unless they are to the side, of course. The full autonomous modes are exceptional, and the tracking in particular is incredible. Obstacle detection in earlier drones simply stopped it, but with the Mavic Air 2 and the 2S, it can actually attempt to navigate around them. I really put it to the test walking through the woods. It did get stuck a few times because of branches it couldn't work out how to get past. Imagine how good it would be with side sensors. It does have the quick shots if you want to use them, not really my thing. And it also has master shots, which does some of these quick shots and even edits them together. It kind of takes away from the whole pleasure of actually using the drone though. Still, it's clever. Yeah, that's enough of that. Flying the Air 2S is an absolute joy. They really have made these drones incredibly stable and so easy to fly. I really love the new controller that they first brought in with the Mavic Air 2, and the latency is really remarkably impressive. The maximum ISO in D-Log is 1600 ISO, which isn't exactly high, and to access this you need to come out of Auto ISO. Once you can't get exposure anymore with your shutter speed and removing NDs at 1600 ISO, it's just going to get very noisy, and so neat video is going to be your only hope. The camera is such a huge improvement over the Air 2S, and in many ways, the Mavic 2 Pro. It would be great to see this on the Pocket 3. Their Pocket 2 is much better than the first one, but having a 1-inch camera on it would be ideal. It would need to have continuous autofocus like the Pocket 2 has. The Air 2S autofocus is not. So I was quite limited in these shots of my cats in the amount of movement that I could do to maintain focus. I did check on the DJI website about the autofocus. It wasn't very enlightening. I would strongly recommend upgrading to this from the Mavic Air 2, or if you're trying to decide which one to buy, without question, get this, because it really isn't much more money. Whether you should sell your Mavic 2 Pro and buy this really comes down to how wide you want your lens and how important the stronger motors are, plus of course your need of the side sensors. It would also be nice to see them bring out something quite different. Basically, sort of Mavic 2 Pro size drone with interchangeable lenses. It seems like the main thing that's kind of missing from the lineup. There was also a lot of rumours of a Phantom 5 having this, but that never materialised. Also, I'm surprised they've not embraced that multi-camera technology that we see on smartphones and put a telephoto, a standard and ultra-wide, onto a small drone. Maybe one day we will see both these drones, who knows.
The Air 2S is a very powerful drone. It's not perfect, it's got a couple of things which let it down. The crop in the 4K 5060p is substantial, and the tripod mode being turned into the CineSmooth at 5 meters a second, it's just too fast. And this is something which can be fixed in firmware. So I would like to see that. I'd like to see some ability to tweak our image like you can with the Mavic 2 Pro. And I wish I had an aperture, because being able to control your exposure in the air without having to use shutter speed is a big thing. We're pretty close to a perfect drone, but we're not quite there yet. We've got a few things which need to be tweaked, and I think basically what we're after, well I'm after, is a Mavic 3 Pro. But you know, it's pretty good. You don't have to go, you can stay. I'm still gonna use you. I will use you. Just have tripod mode again, please. All right, come on, come home.
So the little boy sadly headed home because this still wasn't the one. Close, but not quite. But he truly believed that it would come along soon, maybe even tomorrow. Until then, this little flying camera would have a warm bed to sleep in and lots of company. Or maybe not.